David, one of the most interesting parts of your work, and certainly an area that's of deep concern to folks who are in ministry to any age, and certainly to adolescents, was drawing on our theological, our biblical, our narrative resources to assist young people to think about vocation and purpose. Share with us some of your work on the theological resources.
Let me say a little bit about why it's important to build bridges between the faith life of young people and these sparks of purpose, or these coil springs of purpose that they experience. Well, one of the things that we saw is, observed, is when young people don't have that theological language to help them make sense of desire, compassion, joy, and responsibility, when they don't have that theological language, what happens is they split this part of their life, they split it off, and they live their faith life over here, and they try to live out some kind of life in response to these epiphanies of recruitment, these coil springs of purpose. And so what happens is either their faith becomes irrelevant or less relevant for them, and they embrace these coil springs, or they embrace their faith and these coil springs of purpose become less relevant. And we think that what's important and what the doctrine of vocation implies or demands is that all of our lives are taken up in the story of God's story. So what this implies is the importance of helping young people find theological stories, theological language for making sense of desire, making sense of compassion, making sense of joy and responsibility. And so we have a wealth of resources in our tradition. Whole theological systems have been built around each of these different themes. Thomas Aquinas built a whole system around desire. John Sobrino, a liberation theologian, built a whole system of theology around compassion. Jürgen Moltmann's system leans heavily into the importance of giftedness and joy. And Walter Wink's whole work on powers and principalities have an enormous amount to say about how we respond, how we're responsible in the context of the powers and principalities. And so in my book, I create little fictional conversations between these theologians and young people, that not necessarily to suggest exactly how adults should talk to youth, but at least the kinds of conversations that we need to have with youth. For our work today, we asked our groups to think of scriptural references, biblical stories, doctrines, even hymns or songs that address these themes in one way or another. Now, we only spent 15 or 20 minutes as a group on it, and if you were working with a youth group, helping young people make these connections, you'd want that to be more deliberate and developed. But young people, my fear is that young people have a very thin sensibility about the significance of the gospel story and theology. And many young people think it has primarily to do with otherworldly salvation and not the kingdom of God, the fullness of the kingdom of God. And so that's one of the key points of my research in my book is adding on to the work of Damon and Benson is, in addition to helping be these spark champions for youth, helping them also find theological language, metaphors, songs, ideas to build this bridge to their sparks. Not always to affirm those sparks. Sometimes those sparks need refining, and sometimes they need a change in direction. But we need some way of speaking into the context and to the coil springs of their own epiphanies, their own experiences of spark.